Hey there, Miss Osuna here with another video. This time we are going to do hair with watercolor. Go on ahead, grab your stuff, and let's get started. And remember, if you do the work, you'll get the results. But work is required. Alright, we're going to start off drawing our oval and our straight line. Going ahead and put your spaces there. Shoulder guideline goes at 1.5. And then we're going to just divide the oval. Divide horizontally and vertically like a letter T. Then divide the top section and the bottom section horizontally. Next, we're going to go on ahead and put in some parenthesis shapes for the hair. So parting on the left and some smiles and some frowns for the hairline closest to the face. H-E-M. Those three parts: hairline, eye line, and mouth. These are all approximations, just to give you a starting point. Now put your parenthesis shapes in and your ear, because our hair is going to be tucked behind the ear on one side. Now we're going to put in our neck with a soft parenthesis shape, landing at 1.5, that's our shoulder guideline, and go on ahead and add in the next parenthesis segment. Shoulders are 1.5 head spaces wide for this croquis. And then extend your shoulders down to the edges. Don't go beyond the 1.5 head spaces wide. Round off those shoulders just with that soft parenthesis shape. And then it's time for us to move on down to space number 3 where we have our waist. So, as you can see, we're going to drag down at the waist. So make sure your horizontal guideline is there at 3. The waist will be about 1 head space wide. And then drag your shoulders down. And of course, you can taper in the side. You can make it a little smaller or a little bigger. And then about 2.25 is where the bottom of the bust would be. You can make your bust as full or as small as you like. And that's just with our semicircles, which are just like our parenthesis shapes. All right, guidelines for your arm, and then go on ahead and drag that down to 3, and then the underarm aims up toward the bottom of the bust. Next, we're going to continue on with our hair, and it's just going to be long hair that comes down beyond the shoulder. So as you do these parenthesis shapes for the hair outline, you're creating very soft curves. It's fairly straight hair that we will be drawing today. Just make sure you have one set of lines on the inside closest to the body and then on the outside, and then we'll fill in the rest. Now we are doing our tracing paper so that of course we can rub this onto watercolor. So just grab whatever tracing paper you have. Make sure you have a pencil that's dark enough, because we're going to trace this and then we will rub it onto our watercolor paper. Remember that tracing allows you to stylize because you can see the lines through it. So you can definitely adjust some of these lines if you want at this step. Okay, so now we have our stylized version on our tracing paper. We can put the original sketch away. I'm going to use a piece of watercolor paper that I've already drawn, and if you want to see that video, I will link it below for the hair that's blonde. So I'm just going to rub with the lead side down onto my watercolor paper. And I'm going to grab a Copic marker because they have rounded edges on the backs of them. And I'm just going to rub and transfer this tracing onto my watercolor paper. All right, you can check to make sure your tracing is there, and it's time for us to paint. Okay, so I'm gonna do red hair, so I'm starting with an orange. And once again, this is a very inexpensive paint palette. You can go high and low, or whatever you prefer. So I'm mixing in some of this orange color so that I can have my very first layer. Remember, because we're doing red hair, I'm gonna start off with an orangey yellow color, and I try to mix a few colors to make one color as a regular practice. So I've mixed it with a larger brush so that I can have a nice puddle of paint waiting for me. And now I'm gonna switch on over to a brush that will give me more control. It's a number 1. It's a watercolor brush, it's synthetic, and it's a round. So I'm going to start the actual painting with a smaller brush, but I mixed the paint with a larger brush so that the mixing process went a little bit more quickly. So we're starting here at our root and making those parenthesis shapes, just like when we sketched. And we always start on our shadow side. For us, the shadow side is the left. And then we're going to have a shadow closest to the face. So where the hair touches the face, it's also going to be shadow. Then I'm going to start from just the bottom going up, and I'm going to add a bit more each time. You want to not have full coverage. You want to leave some white spaces. So here I'm shadowing and making the strokes by the location closest to the body, because where the hair touches the body, it's going to have a shadow. And then from the bottom going up and from the top coming down, I'm just going to continue with my first pass of my lightest red shade on the shadow side again, but I still start from left to right, and I want to leave more white spaces, especially in the beginning. You can take them away later. So here, these parenthesis shapes are starting close to where the hair touches the face, and that again is a shadow area. So those will be placed in darker. And then I'm just going to go from the bottom coming up. At some point I will switch and do top down, excuse me. So things definitely are both ways, top down and bottom up. Okay, so I'm going to continue this process until I feel I'm done with level 1. Remember, level 1, or the first pass, is always the lightest tone. And I just want to take away some of the whites, but I do want to have a nice halo effect. And I want the painting to breathe. So leaving some white space is helpful. Now here's what I was saying. I'll also go top down. And I'm not going to worry about being too neat because I can always fix that up later. And hair is not usually super thick at the ends. I guess it just depends on the person. But in general, sometimes it's thinner at the ends. So that was just an example of me doing top down so that the edges of the hair can appear thinner. And it's not perfectly cut. So continue this process until you are done with layer number 1, that first color. All right, so that concludes that first layer of color, which was my lightest. Now I'm going to mix in a little bit darker because once again, we're aiming for red. So I have the bigger brush because mixing with a larger brush makes the process faster. And I'm making this darker just by adding a tiny little bit of a deeper red to my orange. And so you can add whatever colors, and this technique can work for different hair colors. So if you were doing brown hair, you could add a little bit of dark brown or black. All right, I cleaned off my brush and now I'm going to switch to a number 1 because again, it's a lot smaller. And now I'm going to use that darker color and start painting the second time around. So starting in the same way from the crown of the head downward and then from the shadow side, I'm just adding these strokes right on top of where I originally painted. And remember that you wait a little bit in between so there's enough time for your paint layers to dry. Because I'm not using too much water, I'm literally able to see it dry within about 3 minutes. Here again, top down and bottom up. So I did it both ways. So you can see uneven strands, and we'll neaten it up at the end. But the idea is going top down at the edges and bottom up will help to have a nice balanced look. Because again, the hair can be thinner at the very, very bottom. And I want it to feel a bit more realistic. Now we're just going to continue on our light source side. Remember, starting from left to right. And we're leaving more white spaces on this right side because, of course, that is where the light is. And once again, we are doing for our bottom edge here, top down this time. So it works both ways so that you can get a nice, realistic looking hair when everything is said and done. Your fashion sketches will jump off the page. So notice now I'm going bottom up. Like I said, you do both ways so that you can have a nice realistic look. And it'll feel like hair instead of feeling like stripes. I'm just going to repeat this process with the same color once more because I want to have more depth. But if you feel like you're done with this second color, you can move on from there. Now I'm going to move on to colored pencil. I have a mahogany deep burgundy type color. And this mahogany color is just going to allow me to create even more depth. So parenthesis shapes once again, starting from the crown, going downward, and then from the bottom coming up. Notice I always skip some spaces, so over by the ear is where I start, so that you have white space in between. And then now I'm able to, because I'm using colored pencil, pull out some of the individual hair strands a little bit more. And also I can pull out more shadows. Now here we are going top down just to add to that hem, and like I said, you can neaten things up, and this is that process of making it a bit more neat. All right, so here I'm just going to give a bit of a shadow where the hair is closest to the face, and then a bit of a wave because hair is not perfectly straight as it goes down and around the shoulder. And then once again, top down when it comes to evening up that bottom edge. That's it for my mahogany color, which is like a burgundy. Now I'm just going to go on to a terracotta. So it's a brown, truly, there's less red in it, and it'll just deepen. So the same thing, start from the crown and go down, and you can see I'm still leaving spaces so that the layers underneath show through, but it just adds another layer of depth. And of course, where the hair is closest to the body, there's more shadow. And then our shadow side is on the far left, so I'm making sure that I add more of this color on the far left, and then again neatening up that bottom edge. All right, so now I'm done with that color. That was color number 2. And I'm moving on to a dark chocolate. It's like a Hershey color. And I'm going to add even more depth. But look, the lines are shorter. These curved parenthesis shapes are shorter because the color is stronger. But it does add so that the root truly does feel darker, and it'll add so the shadows feel darker. So I'm going to continue on this process on my light source side in the same way. But remember, when you're using your darker tones, to press very lightly so that you don't overpower the sketch. Okay, for the final bit, I'm just going to use some correction pen and tighten up that bottom edge, and that'll do it for this session. I'm definitely looking forward to hearing from you and seeing all the great things that you are doing, because I know that you are the future of fashion. So until we meet again, happy sketching.